Welcome to PMQ Side Dishes. In-depth interviews and chats to go along with some of the most important and interesting PMQ pizza editorial. I'm your host, Hernandez, and today I'm here with U.S. Pizza team member Jimmy Gadd of Goodfellas Pizzeria in Cincinnati, Ohio area. I'm not sure exactly. I know there are several up in that area, but that's kind of your realm, right? So I want to say
that is correct. Hello, everybody.
All right. So why don't you tell us just a little bit about yourself and what you do besides what I've already told the folks?
Yeah. So I am an area manager for Goodfellas Pizzeria. I oversee operations for the Cincinnati market, which is 3 locations and select stores in Kentucky. I also am part of their developmental team as far as training and recruiting. And then, me and a couple other guys, we head off, the openings of new stores. In the short time I've been with the company, 7-8 years, we've opened many locations. So that's a big part of my job is training and build outs and just overall flow of those restaurants when we open new ones. So.
All right. Well, how did you begin your pizza journey then? What was the very first thing? Was it a passing, just a job to, kill the time?
So I've always been in the service industry, restaurants, short order cooks, back of the house. Never much front of the house work for me. I was always one of those guys that hide behind the walls and I've dipped my toe in pizza throughout the years, but it really wasn't until Goodfellas that I found a love for it. And I think I equate a lot of that to my journey throughout this program and what we're about to talk about. So
okay. You've been watching any of the rest of the stuff, or you're following up from the article? We have been talking about mental wellness in the industry and just all the stress that goes on in the restaurant industry. I keep using The Bear as a good example, but if you've seen that show and just some of the more hectic one-shot takes of the restaurant in action, it does a good job. I get goosebumps every time after the scene. I'm tired. I'm like, oh.
Yeah. Was it episode 7 of season 1 with that one shot? When the online ordering happens, dude.
I believe it's
I tell people all the time, I'm like, listen, man, I don't care if you're in the industry or you're not even a big TV fan. Just watch that episode and you'll understand. Like, it's such a really good depiction of the chaos. And then when I found out that it was a one shot from beginning to end, 22-minute, one take, I was like, it's insane.
Yeah, just imagine being the guy to mess that up. You don't want to be that guy.
Yeah, 21 minutes in and you fumble a line and then it's like, oh, man. Yeah.
Oh man. So that aside, I'm tired already. But we want to talk about mental wellness in the industry. And I met Jimmy a few years ago. I believe we were passing by the NRA, or maybe you found interest in the team.
Yeah.
And just so happens that we were both kind of on the same recovery. I just begun my sobriety, I believe, at the time, and I'm not sure how far you were into it. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about your journey and your personal struggles that you had kind of coming into it, maybe how they began and then leading up to what the deciding factor to change was.
Yeah, I would love to. Obviously, it feels really weird starting out a conversation about this without saying the following. My name is Jimmy and I'm an alcoholic, right? And then I typically will get into it. But like I said, I've always been in the service industry. My issues with alcohol and drugs kind of started typically early on, just like everybody else. And predominantly it was just to be cool, right? You're in high school, you're hanging out with some friends that are smoking and doing bad things. And you just want to be looked at in a light that, people will accept. Right. So you just kind of latch on to that kind of stuff. And then obviously as it progressed, I moved into the service industry, particularly because it was an easy job to get, right? Restaurant work was very easy. And when I started in the industry, it was kind of like expected, right? So I think the zeitgeist is changing now within our current culture. But, early on, you could find pretty much anything and everything inside of the restaurant industry. the way that restaurants are, the fast paced, high volume, long hours, um, it was something that helped everybody get by, or at least helped me get by in my experience, right? Looking back, obviously it was always a bad thing, but in the beginning, I looked at it as kind of beneficial, right? Because it helped me. I came to work on time. I put in the extra hours. I did everything that was asked of me, and most of the time because I had the abundance of extra energy, right? And on top of it, I needed money to go out and get the next thing, right? So one, I wanted to be accepted, right? And that's what everybody was doing, so that's what I wanted to do. And then ultimately, what happens is it starts to become manageable, right? Your priorities shift, right? Work and being accepted fall below getting that next one, and just trying to get well. And that's really what it came to me. I say alcoholic, but drinking was rarely ever my issue, right? Or what I latched onto. I was big into drugs, particularly. Downers, uppers, it didn't matter what it was, but I identify as an alcoholic, right? Because I link it to kind of a problem with consumption, right? Even to this day, 8 years, July, I celebrated 8 years, and I still can't open a bag of chips without eating the whole thing, right? So I've always been in the restaurant industry. There was a short period where I joined the service to try to do like a geographical change, right? I was in the Army for 4.5 years, the reserve, and that didn't fix me, right? So I just continued down the line, right?
Do you think Alcoholics Anonymous, do you think those qualities or the values and stuff translates across the board, regardless of what your vice is? Can you just copy paste, erase alcohol and write in whatever your thing is? Is it beneficial for someone to do that even if they're not a drinker?
100%, man. I always tell some of the new guys and girls that come in, like, you just replace that word with whatever it is, right? It's a design for living. If you apply those steps and those principles to whatever it is you're struggling with, I promise you, you'll get a positive outcome. So, I even if you're not an alcoholic, I think that there's things that you can derive from those books and those principles that'll change your life or anybody's life. So.
Well, as you had mentioned too about the bag of chips, and for me, it's not just alcohol. You said you got started early, like everybody. I actually held out really late before I began anything. I don't know why, but there's the Latino side of me is very likes alcohol. There's very much an addictive personality on that side, and it takes hold. It's huge in me. So anything I do to excess. If I like it, I'm gonna just do it to excess. So I'm at the point where I won't drink socially. I won't even try it because I know it's the same as a bag of chips. You open that bottle, it's a slippery slope. Do you find that a lot of people have that? Is it more? I guess I was going to say, is there a lot of people who go down this path? Do they have that addictive personality, or do you see a lot of people who just acquire that addictive personality through the stress that they have in their life?
I definitely think so. I mean, I'm for one, and I fully believe that it's definitely a disease that's centered in the mind that somebody can acquire. Maybe we're born with it, maybe we're not. Maybe social interactions or trauma or whatever it is can activate that. But I think me personally, from the very beginning, it's been in there, and
right.
Once it manifested, right, it was to oblivion. You know what I mean? It was I just wanted to keep going and keep going, and and it's with me. So everybody says you need a low bottom, right, to realize, and that wasn't the case for me. I didn't. I never went to jail or prison. Knock on wood, not yet. But I'm very grateful that never happened, because I'm a very we'll say a cute guy would not last long in prison, right? So I'm very happy that that didn't happen. But I think everybody's story is beneficial, right? Because there are some people out there that maybe are in the same boat as you or me, somebody that didn't start till later in life, that they need to hear, right? They need to hear your story. They need to hear my story to really relate to, right? I never went to jail. I never, got in major criminal trouble. And there's probably people out there, which my case before I actually, made the decision to get clean and sober was I don't have a problem, right? I used to run with some of my cousins and friends that would, they were full on, banging dope and needle junkies, and my my response was, oh, I'm not a junkie like them, so I'm good, I don't have a problem, all the while I'm
Right.
stealing from my family and my friends, right? It's delusion at its core. uh and it I think if I hadn't heard somebody's story that was like mine initially, it wouldn't have kind of registered when I decided to get sober.
Well, and it's like somebody was telling me the other day, I believe it was Sarah Webster Norton, of serving, the judgment in it of of other people, but also people who have the problem, like the alcoholics who are on their third six pack of the morning, saying those damn guys and their pot and their fentanyls.
Yeah.
It's like they got issues. It's like, come on, man.
Yeah.
But the blinders are on, and I was highly functional, and that was the problem.
Yeah, I
The
held
thing
I
was is
held a
that I
job.
knew I had a problem.
Yeah. I
And
held a job all through addiction that, I had a vehicle which benefited me because the people that were running, I wanted to they needed a ride, so I was, capable of giving them a ride, and I benefited from that. So uh there were levels to my addiction that blinded me, like, oh man, I don't have a problem. Look at me go.
at a certain point, I knew I had a problem. I knew it wasn't interfering, but it was becoming too much. It becomes habit for anybody. You work it in, and all of a sudden in your head, it's not a problem because it's habit. Um, and for some reason, as much as addictive personalities I have, I can quit things cold turkey and be fine. And
Right.
it's insane. And I mean, I really just did that on there. So it's a matter of I can quit anytime I want, but I know that I just takes me too long to decide to want to quit. That's my problem. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have the willpower to do it. I proved it several times over.
I
Just
am baffled by people like that. I'm very, part of me is jealous, right? I go out and I still hang out with friends outside of work that, are drinking, there are alcohol at some functions that I go to, and I'm not uncomfortable around it anymore. And, I see people take a drink and, they'll drink half a beer and then they'll leave it there. And my brain's like, what are you doing?
yeah,
Like, yeah, finish that up. Uh,
yeah. Well, the guys walk in. It's when you're a kid, it was always cool to see the guy walk in and in the office go over get the whiskey or whatever. And then they do it at the end of the day, and they take like one shot with a couple ice cubes. I'm like, how does that do anything for
yeah.
me?
Yeah.
Because I'm
Right.
on like my fifth coffee cup. This is just coffee, by the way, but this used
Yeah.
to be alcohol and ice, whiskey and
Yeah.
ice. And anyway,
So Goodfellas, we do have one of the top 50 bourbon bars in the country attached to seven of our locations, and that's one of the things that helped me. I stay grounded, right? It's because I see people getting, we're very high volume slice joint that people like to drink at, and I see the absolute mess that you can become. So it's a constantly reminder for me, especially in those college towns.
yeah, and it was funny because even when I was always able to stay in control. I very rarely lost control. So even when I was drinking and having a good time, drunk people still pissed me off.
Yeah.
I still had
Right.
zero tolerance for drunk people. But
Yeah.
that being said, you had said earlier that most people kind of, or there's at least a lot of mention of that bottoming out moment. Rock bottom. I mentioned that in another interview as well. But you didn't necessarily have one. I mean, what was your deciding factor to actually start changing? What did you wake up just one morning and decide to, or what
No,
happened for
I
you?
I think it was over the course of several months. I think the last, I did drugs and drank really, the, throughout my all of my teen years and into my 20s. And I think it was the last few months where you know, I bouncing from job to job because I was getting fired because I couldn't show up to work on time, or I just had no motivation. And like I said earlier, like the priorities shift, right? So all I was worried about was getting paid, and I could bounce between jobs and work at those. And I don't know, man. I honestly think that that when I decided to contact a detox facility, which a local one around here that doesn't exist anymore, it's called Drogi Detox. You would call them and you would get on a list, and then they would call you when they had a bed. It was free. Um, so I was calling them. Really, honestly, the idea of getting sober sounds way better when you're messed up, right? You get depressed and you get sad, and you start thinking about what life could be without it. Man, I'm this is my last one. This is going to be it, and that's what would happen. I would isolate. I would get high, um, and then I would just get down on myself, right? So I would research all these different resources to get better and get help, and I tried to do it without reaching my hand out to ask people for help, because at this time, none of the people that I had in my life were considered actual friends, right? They were also uh, out in the madness, and they were trying to benefit them. So if I didn't have what they wanted or they didn't have what I wanted, we didn't hang out, right? So uh, and by this time I had hurt and wronged almost every one of my family members, so they didn't want anything to do with me. Um, I was kind of flopping around from house to house, and I was calling. It's funny. I would call this detox facility, and they would put me on the list, right? And then they would call me, and I promise you, every time they would call me, I would be getting paid the very next day. So I'm like,
Oh,
I'll just wait. Put me at the bottom of the list, right? Uh, and that's the thing, right? I needed money to get my fix, and at this point, I wasn't even getting high anymore, man. I was getting well, is what they call it, right? I was just trying to maintain um, just life, right? So uh, I remember vividly the first time. So I originally got sober in November of 2014, and I was working at this little short order diner close to me, and I, I was standing over the flat top, and I got the phone call from Drogi, right? And I was withdrawing at this time. I was really sick. I hadn't had anything to get, so I just wasn't feeling really well. Um, and they called me and they said they had a bed for me, and I turned around to my boss, which I have no idea why I even went to this guy. Barely knew him from Adam, and I told him, and I said, "Hey, man, I have a serious substance abuse problem, and this place is telling me that I can go there." And before I could finish my sentence, this guy snatched me up, hugged me, and told me everything was going to be all right. His name was Brian Zai. He was 30 years sober, and he recently died a couple years ago of cancer. But I can tell you that if that guy wasn't there at that moment, at that time, there's a good chance that I wouldn't have gone. Right? He snatched me up, and I was crying at this point. He said, um, "Everything's going to be all right. You did the right thing." So he helped me get into that program, and honestly, uh, I probably went into this program just to get to lower my tolerance. Right? I can definitely guarantee you that when I was in there, it was a 7-day treatment program. The plan was just clean out for 7 days, and then I can come back out
yeah.
and I can manage it, right? Um, and that was my plan. And then honestly, dude, I was in there, and it was on a Thursday when a group of guys came in. All of them worked at Goodfellas, um, and they spoke, and they told their story, and one of them I immediately resonated with. Right? They said, find people that have what you want, and latch on, and that's what I did, dude. I followed these dudes around like a puppy, right? I knew that they all had several years of sobriety, and they looked like they were doing well. And I got out of of that treatment center on a Friday, and they took me to a meeting that night, and they got me a job as a just a basic line level employee. I was making 7.25 an hour. Had never tossed a pizza before in my life, and they just put me to work, man. And 70% of the people that worked in that building, this is the Goodfellas in Covington, Kentucky. 70% of them were in the program. The other 30% needed to be. So I was in a I was in a good spot. So uh, I that kind of launched my pizza path, right? These
Okay.
guys looked really cool tossing pizza, and they had a lot of fun late nights working till 3 in the morning. And I just did whatever I could do to to do better within that company, but also stay sober, right? I went to meetings and I did the program, I did the steps until I got enough to where I could be like, all right, I'm good, right? I think I can kind of back it off a little bit, start focusing on Jimmy, right? So
Right.
about six months in, July 5th, 2015. Well, July 4th would have been the last day that I had a mind altering drug. I woke up and I wish I could tell you that it was a terrible day. Like something happened to me, right? And I was like, oh, I got to get high, right? Nothing. I was having a great day. I just reconnected with my mom, and I went out to eat with her. And I just something clicked in my head was like, I wonder if you can remember his number, meaning the dope boy or the drug dealer's number. And immediately before I knew it, I was over there. And what that was is I hadn't built up that muscle memory of who to call when I started feeling like that, right? I didn't have a mental defense against the first drink, right? Um, so I got high and I tried to go to work. And this is the second thing that happened to me that I think really changed my life is I got high and I tried to come to work. I had to work that night at 10 p.m. This is a Friday, at 10 p.m. for a late night shift. And my boss, who's actually my general manager, we kind of connected on the way into the restaurant, and he was in the program, been sober for several years. He's now my best friend, but he stopped me and he said, "You're high." Immediately called me out. Of course, I was like, "No, I'm not." And the guy started crying, man. He started bawling his eyes out because he genuinely cared about me and what I had become. And then I started crying, right? So then you got two grown ass men sitting in a very high volume bar district in Covington, Kentucky, just sitting on a bench crying, right? So I went. He told me, "It's like you're not going to work tonight." He gave me a second chance. He told me to go to a meeting, and then the next day I got started, and that was July 5th, 2015. I hadn't had a drink or a drug since then. Um, so that I think that was another level of compassion that I just never experienced before, and it really just showed me, uh, uh, you know, what could happen, right? If you surround yourself with the right people that are doing the right things. Yeah, it
Okay,
did.
so you kind of began your journey with Goodfellas, had a couple slip ups, and then July 4th, 5th was the first day of
Yeah,
sobriety from
yeah,
2015. Okay.
yeah. So when I was in the treatment program, these guys would come in every Thursday morning. The same 4 or 5 cats would come in every Thursday morning, even if they just closed the night before, and they would hold a meeting and talk to people in detox. And I started doing that with them. For the first year of my tenure, with the company and with sobriety, we would go there every single Thursday morning and kind of try to help people. Put our hand out.
You've probably touched on the briefest bit in our
Yeah.
conversation already, but some of the effects on your professional and your social life, because it sounded like you were like me. You see on TV and stuff, you see a lot of times it's portrayed as a sloppy drunk and people stumbling in with that one part of their shirt untucked and
Yeah.
tie
Yeah.
backwards. It's like, it's not always like that. It's not.
No,
Um,
no,
it sounded
I
like
think
your journey affected your personal life with your family a lot too. But I mean, what were some of the effects? Did they manifest all forever? Did it all happen towards the end? And what were some of them, personal and social?
no, I think professionally, like I said before, I looked at it as like a benefit, right? It allowed me to be more in tune, and active and willing to work.
Hmm.
Very long hours, and socially, man, I built a network of friends that I thought cared about me, right? And generally they didn't, because they were going through the same stuff, and they might have somewhere deep down cared, but I can tell you that I don't speak to almost any of them anymore. That I see some of them in passing throughout my journey, and some of them didn't make it. I was constantly changing jobs, because it's
Yeah.
pretty easy to get into a restaurant, especially if you got experience, at least at the time. And again, like it was almost, you knew what you were getting yourself into, especially if you were a nighttime short order cook, right? There was somebody was going to have something that you could get a hold of. So that was
Yeah.
another reason, right, that I stayed in the industry for so long. And socially, I isolated, man. So towards the middle and in the end is when I start caring about myself and only me, and what does Jimmy get out of it? And then you just kind of you're not talking to people anymore. You're not reaching out to people anymore. You just kind of lose all touch, And if you do reach out to them, it's because you wanted something that they got, right?
Is that something that happens more often than not? Is that the typical way people go about it? Is it numerous false starts and numerous setbacks? I mean, we all know a lot of people tend to have, hiccups and,
Yeah,
setbacks
I
like that.
think
But
I can tell you I've never met anybody that has failed at this, that has thoroughly followed a program, whether it be AA or NA or anything of that nature, that has thoroughly taken the suggestions. Um, I've never met anybody, that has gone back, right? We are not to be to be held responsible for things that go on up here. It's
yeah,
it's madness up there, right? So for people like myself or anybody else that's kind of in this situation or have been, when we are left to our own devices, it's all bad. We tend to think that we know better, and we don't, right? Obviously, look at the way life has gone in the past. Uh, you're an unreliable narrator of your events. So
what do you do now? Say when you get stressed out. Yeah, but I mean, pizza business hasn't gotten any easier. That's for sure.
right,
So
the fellowship that I've built and the people around me is a big outlet for me. We talked a little bit earlier about I'd moved, so a year or so into my sobriety, I got the opportunity because I was going at the best of my ability without drugs and alcohol, and I can promise you, anybody that is sober, getting sober, if they have a thorough grasp on their program or whatever it is they're doing, they will outwork anybody around them, right? So if they just apply a little bit of that energy to that they used to get high or drunk in the past to their work ethic now, the sky's the limit. So that's kind of what I did is I applied all that energy, and I got the opportunity to move, and I moved to Indiana. All right, moved there to open some stores, and I left my network. Right, I left all my friends and the people that I'd built up around me, and those mechanisms and outlets. I'd left. They weren't right down the street I could go talk to anymore. And these guys, man, these guys would come up there every couple weeks and just to visit me, and we'd go to a meeting, and they would call me all the time just to make sure that I was doing all right and doing the things that I needed to do. So that's a huge outlet, friendship and fellowship. I've had more fun in sobriety than I could ever imagine. I really enjoy work, and I reap the benefits from a good work ethic, but I think that can take its toll, right? So um, we substitute our old addictions for new ones, right? So in sobriety, even in 8 years, I find myself going through these ebbs and flows of I'll put work and everything in front of my personal relationships, and sometimes that's a coping mechanism, but most of the time it's just constant communication with my fellowship and my friends about what's going on in my life, right? The moment I start to bottle things in, I build resentments, and resentments are the death of someone like me. I'll find a reason to drink or drug over it, I promise. If I don't spew it out, and I understand why
right.
people go to therapy, right? I've never been one to do actual therapy, but I can understand why that's a huge outlet. I thoroughly advocate people to do that if that's what works for them.
Dude, I had a dream, and I just got reminded of it. I had a glass of whiskey on ice, and before I knew it, in the dream, I was like 2/3 through, and then I felt guilty.
Yeah,
And that happens a lot. And it's like when I quit smoking cold turkey a couple times too. So it's the same way. It's like in the dream, you're smoking a cigarette, and you're like, oh, all that work is undone.
there's nothing more that makes you feel guilty, right? Than thinking about having a drink. So when I had relapsed, I felt terrible, right? Because I had all that stuff in my head, and I knew what life was good and what it was about, and I immediately just felt guilty. So I've definitely had dreams like that before, where I woke up like, "Oh my
Mm.
god, I should probably tell somebody."
Well, I never did. I didn't do any of the programs and stuff. Very much just did it on my own.
Yeah,
And I am an enigma. I mean, not a lot of people can do it. I'm not trying to brag. It's weird. I told when I quit drinking, I quit because I was still drunk from the night before. And I'm like, I'm
yeah,
good. And the second day, I'm like, I still don't feel like drinking. Third day, I said, let's see how long I can go. And
yeah.
that was over 2 years ago. I guess I'm getting to. Didn't use an assistance program, something through like therapy and stuff, but you went to meetings, and there are programs for everything. But say there's not something specifically for what you're going through right here. Do most of those programs typically care if you are they accepting of you if your problem is not what they focus on, or is it more that this person needs help and we'll help them the best we can regardless?
I definitely don't think anybody would ever, shy you away. At least I've never seen it in my experience.
Well, that's why I ask the simple questions, man, to get the obvious answers.
Yeah,
Of course, they'll just say, "Hey, we'll help you,
yeah.
but this guy might be better."
I don't know what I'd do if I walked into a place and somebody's like, "Nah, get out of here. You don't drink. What are you
Yeah.
smoking cigarettes? Get out of here." I definitely think that if I went into a one specific kind of meeting and I talked about it, they're going to point me in the direction of the right kind of
Ah,
place. Like, hey, I'd be more than willing to help you out. Um, but I think you would be more beneficial going to this, right? I tell people all the time in the program, like, you know, don't think about this being your only answer, right? If you have underlying mental illnesses, like I strongly suggest that you reach out to a therapist. There are some things outside of alcoholism and addiction that you need medication for. You know what I mean? There are some
right.
things that you need to seek outside treatment and assistance for. So even to this day, I care a lot about what people think about me. It's a huge character defect, and I think a lot of us do, right? So
Mhm.
what stops people in their tracks is one, me personally, in my experience being a man, right? I don't want to ask somebody for help, uh, let alone another man, right? I don't want to ask or put all my problems on the table. So I think a lack of willingness to put yourself out there and talk about it is really what stops people. And I'm sure all the jobs that I've ever had have had some sort of outlet, right? If I was willing to talk about it and bring it up, I'm sure there were some sort of programs that they would have provided, or at least some sort of help. Um, but I was not in a position, or nor did I want to actually try. Right.
Right. What is something that the industry is doing wrong right now about mental wellness or support of it?
Looking at it as a disciplinary action as opposed to a healthcare problem. Right. I think immediately going to the defense and threatening to fire people or reprimand them for their actions, as opposed to treating it as a healthcare issue. I think dissemination of information, right? I think, like I said, all those places probably had some sort of program, but it wasn't out there in the light, right? It wasn't right there in my face. Providing those sort of outlets and phone numbers and all that is really, I think that's one of the things they could do to try to get it better.
But I mean, the restaurant industry has always been hard. But I mean, is it just because of social media and everybody's problems are come to the surface so much quicker now that we're noticing it more, or is it just gotten so much harder to be in this industry?
Oh man, that's such a interesting question. I think so. It's always been hard, right? It's always been
Right.
high volume, high energy, long hours, and then I don't know what happened, and I'm sure you've experienced it, and I'm sure knowing a lot of people in the industry have experienced it. But whatever happened after COVID, it's kind of changed people's willingness to work. Man, me in my position, I try to provide my guys and my management team and my leadership teams. I try to make sure that they get their associated days off. But sometimes it's hard. You bring
Yeah.
people on, you put them through orientation, and then they just don't want to show up. Um, or they work for a couple weeks, and then it just seems like nobody's kind of got. I don't want to say nobody. There are people that do want to work, but I think it's just something changed in the industry where people just, and I don't think it's just ours. I think it's you know truck drivers, everybody, like just people just don't want to put forth any sort of huge work ethic anymore.
Well, we're scared about robots taking our jobs that we don't want to do.
Yeah. I always thought COVID was going to be the hardest, right? When I was going through that, I mean, we stayed open. We reduced hours. We stayed open for the whole thing. But I promise you, man, the years after COVID have been the
Yeah,
absolute hardest. Um,
it
I
did. It showed with technology that a lot of stuff can be done from home. Not making pizzas
yeah,
and stuff like that, but I mean, it
right,
changed in a generation a mentality of what it means to go to work. It just changed what that feel, and it only took 2 years, less than 2 years.
yeah,
It's that's my personal opinion, obviously.
yeah. I
And
I'm
again, it's
like,
not the whole generation either. So
yeah, like I said, we opened two restaurants in the midst of COVID, and uh, it just seems to be kind of like this roller coaster of, you bring on five, one of them sticks around, uh, and it's just
yeah.
that's the rolling roller coaster that is hiring in our industry. I don't know what it's like in other ones, but I know I have issues with vendors because of lack of staff and people that don't want to come to work. So
Well, I mean, in our industry, turnover's always been pretty high anyway.
right.
It's that in retention has been, I don't want to say low, but turnover retention obviously makes sense. Is that gotten even worse?
I definitely think in the last 2 years it's gotten a lot worse. Obviously people
Mhm.
they want to grab the higher buck, right? They want to go wherever that's going to pay them a little bit more, and I understand that. But I think people aren't looking at the big picture. I think one of the things that we do really well as a company, and I know other restaurants around us, is we try to put our hand out into that community and provide second chances to people. Um,
Yeah.
because it's really hard on the wellness, the mental wellness of the workers that are working, right? The people that are here and dealing with those very nice customers constantly on a daily basis, and especially when you're short staffed because somebody didn't come in. Man, it's really hard, and we're customer
Yeah.
servants at the base of it, right? So whether it's pizza or whatever retail, like I'm dealing with customer service at the forefront of it. So if I go in there like, well, what can I get for you? You know what I mean? Nobody's going to have a good
Yeah.
time. So I think the hiring issues and retention, you're always going to have that core, right? So most restaurants I've ever worked in, there've been 3 or 4 or 5 people that have been there for a really long time, and then the rest of them kind of rotate, right? And then
Yeah.
every now and then somebody kind of joins that pack, and then eventually you kind of build a really strong team. And I think we're getting back to that, but I think it's been a rough go the past couple years for sure, man.
Well, I'm glad to hear at least that you think that we're getting back to that. That's good.
Yeah.
It might be a slow path. It's easy to fall backwards really fast. It's harder to get back to where you are. So,
Yeah, and it's
um,
interesting. Different markets are different. From my experience, Kentucky or Louisville market might be harder than the Cincinnati market
yeah,
some weeks or months, and then Indiana, it's just it's weird how people like, all right, I think I want to work this quarter, you know what I mean, and then the next quarter they're like, I
yeah.
don't want to do it. So
Well, what is something you think that the industry or just operators are doing right to manage mental well being in the industry? Give them a pat on the back about something they're doing.
yeah, so I can only speak from my experience and a few other local places that I know that are doing this. One, uh, the upper management, or they're acting as like a support staff, right? So that's kind of what I see myself as. I oversee and operate um, 3 locations with the help of a fourth. And I try to support my team as much as possible, even if that means picking up a shift so that they don't have to, right? So I think
Yeah,
getting out of the comfort zone and behind the desk and looking at numbers and really providing that shoulder, right, to lean on is one thing, right? Don't be a clipboard leader, right? Second would be make sure that we are providing different outlets. We have several um, programs that we're trying to link up with. One of them is a 24-hour hotline that has meetings every hour, virtual meetings that people with
Wow.
mental issues or mental wellness problems or just overall issues can reach out to. I think providing different kinds of crisis programs, um, and again, treating it as a healthcare issue as opposed to a disciplinary action. So I slowly I see the change, right? It's starting to change.
Mhm.
Um, and I got a second chance, right? So somebody was willing to give me a second chance, and I take that wholeheartedly, and I try to do that myself. Now, obviously, the caveat is like theft or really major issues, then obviously we have to terminate employment. But if it's something that we can work on together, um, really just being willing to do that and not just push them off to the side, because some of my hardest, strongest workers have some of the craziest rap sheets you've ever seen, man. So it's give them a second chance, man. And I promise, like if if they put in the energy and you provide that same kind of energy and guidance, these guys they'll work to the death for you, and they'll love every minute of it.
Are you incorporating this more in your training now?
Yeah, I try to. We just started like an orientation process. The bigger we get, obviously the more guidelines and SOPs that we have to outline and just kind of
Yeah.
protect everybody involved. We've created training videos and orientation videos that really put all that information that I was talking about that didn't necessarily get put out prior, in their face, right? If you need some
Mhm.
help, this is where you can go to get it. I'm very open and honest with the staff, almost to the point where they're like, "Yo, we get it," you know what I mean? But I want them to
Yeah.
understand that, man, I've dealt with it, and I know people. If I haven't dealt with it, I promise you, I know somebody that has, and I can get you into contact with those people. And I really try to push forth that what was given to me, right? I work for
Mhm.
two great owners. It's still independently owned, and you know everybody likes to hear a success story, right? And I tried some of these line level employees that come in. I'm like, man, I started right where you are. I rolled dough for 2 or 3 months straight before I ever got to see a pizza, right? All I did was put forth the energy, and you can too. I want to give my keys to somebody. You know what I mean? That way I can move up and keep going. So I think if we talk about it, right, and we put it in front of their faces, they'll be more willing to open up and be honest.
Okay. What has been your biggest challenge on your path to sobriety? I guess at the beginning and or now or consistently.
I think my biggest challenge is worrying about what other people are doing as opposed to me, right? So I'm very quick to let one little thing kind of bog me down, right? And there's a saying that I constantly have to remind myself is we miss the reality and the beauty of the forest because we were diverted by the ugliness of some of its trees, right? Meaning, don't let one little mistake or somebody else's mistake or ethic kind of ruin your day. And I go through that, man. I mean, even in my
Mm.
position, when I'm working 40, 50 hours a week, 60 hours a week, um, it gets a little rough, right? When I don't get to do some of the things that I wanted to do. That I mean, that's I just have to remind myself, like, man, just an attitude of gratitude, right? Without the energy that I put in, I wouldn't be where I'm at. So I think one of the biggest challenges is kind of being able to let go, man. And I'm not in control of everything. As much as I would like to fix this hiring issue and save everybody's life,
Yeah.
I'm not in control. It's not my show. So
Is that something that in the past, when you were using, you wasn't an issue for you? You just didn't give a crap,
yeah, I didn't care, right? I
Oh,
was
okay,
I was yeah,
okay.
I was very I didn't think about things like that. I was very self-centered, and it was all about me. So if you did something I didn't like, forget you, right?
Hmm.
I'll move on to the next place, and until I'll keep going down the line until I find something that suits me. And um, I would hold those resentments in. So that was a huge thing, is right, being able to communicate those issues, right? If I have an issue with somebody, I am prompt, and I'll voice it, right, as opposed to letting it stew for a long time, because that'll eat me up. As somebody like me,
Yeah.
I'll think about it forever and ever and ever, and then ultimately I'll probably drink over it, right? So
You're 8 years and a few months in,
yeah,
so congrats again on that.
thanks.
You've said you've had a relapse, at least, I mean, you've had your struggles along the
Yeah.
way. What's the best piece of advice you can give the industry, either somebody starting this journey or the industry, on how to help that person?
I would say honesty, willingness, and open mindedness, right? So be honest with yourself, and the people around you, and your coworkers, and your employees, and your employers. The willingness to make the change that is needed, right? Change scares people so much, right? But sometimes you have to change, right? In order, I had to change everything about my life, the people I hung out with, the places I went. I had to change it all, in order to succeed. And then just being open minded, right? Not everybody is going through the same thing, so be open to listen to people's issues, and hopefully help. Put your hand out and help people. The best, to your ability, or at least point them in the right direction. I can promise you, the days that I help people, uh, or at least try to help people, are some of my best days. If somebody calls me, um, and just has a minor issue, and I'm able to be of service, that's kind of the highlight of my day.
Mhm.
So I think the honesty, open mindedness, and willingness, right? Those are the three keys. I think with those, anybody in any company can succeed, right?
I like well, I like how those three words, just as a mantra, can go towards somebody struggling with an addiction, as well as somebody on the other side needing to help this person.
Yeah,
Be honest with that person you need to help. Be willing to help them. Have an open mind. Also, if you have a problem, be honest that you have this problem. Have a willingness to change it, and have an open mind, because shit's going to get real. It's not going to be the
yeah,
way it used to be. So,
yeah,
it's just,
yeah. I
I think
just
it works.
and
Just those three words work for both sides. That's great.
yeah, I think that, just don't be ignorant, right? If you don't know, that doesn't mean it's not true, right? So just be willingness, and be willing and open to speak about it, and learn about it, right?
Don't be ignorant about it. I like that.
Yeah.
All right, man. Well, honestly, guys, that's all we got for today. I want to thank Jimmy for being with us today and sharing his story openly and honestly with us.
Yeah,
Hopefully, it'll
man.
help
Thanks
somebody
for
else
having
out
me.
there. Yeah, hopefully, it helps somebody else out there make that step or help that person that needs it. So, we'll
Yeah.
see you guys next time.
Right on.